All right, so today we're going to dive into something called sustainable engineering. And really, it's a whole new way of thinking, a framework for making decisions that are actually good for people, good for the planet, and good for the bottom line all at the same time. Let's get into it. We start with the really big stuff, don't we? Climate change, pollution, poverty. These problems can feel absolutely massive, almost overwhelming. But the real work starts when we ask this question. It's not just about what big companies should do. It's about our role. What's our part in causing these things? And more importantly, what's our part in actually solving them?
So, how in the world do we even start to tackle all that complexity? Well, the path to finding real, lasting solutions actually begins with one single core idea: sustainability. Now, I know what you might be thinking. It's a word that's thrown around everywhere, right? But for our purposes, we're not treating it like a buzzword. We're treating it as the foundation for everything else we're going to build. And here's the classic, and I think the most powerful definition of it. It's all about balance. First, we have to meet the needs of people today. People need jobs, they need food, they need safe communities right now. But, and this is the absolute key, we have to do it in a way that doesn't steal from the future. We can't screw over our kids and grandkids so they can't meet their own needs. It's a pretty profound responsibility when you think about it.
Okay, so that's the big idea. But how do we actually make that balance happen in the real world? Well, there's a really great mental model that makes this a whole lot clearer. Let's take a look at the framework known as the three-legged stool.
So this model breaks that huge idea of sustainability down into three solid pillars. These are the three legs of our stool. First, you've got the environmental leg. Pretty straightforward. This is about protecting our planet's natural resources. Then there's the social leg, which is all about making sure there's fairness and well-being for everyone. And finally, the economic leg. This is about making sure a solution is financially sound enough to actually stick around.
And here is the most important part. This is not a menu where you get to pick 2 out of 3. For any idea to be truly sustainable, it has to be held up by all 3 legs equally. Think about it. If you have a project that's great for the economy, but it destroys the local environment, well, that stool is going to tip right over. If it's amazing for the environment, but it's so expensive it bankrupts the community, it collapses. All 3 have to be strong.
This really illustrates those trade-offs perfectly. Let's take the classic example, building a new factory. On one hand, you've got a huge economic win, right? It creates jobs, gives the local economy a boost. That is a very strong economic leg. But the cons can be huge. Maybe it pollutes the local river. That's a weak environmental leg. And maybe it's built on land that displaces an entire neighborhood. That's a weak social leg. All of a sudden, that stool is looking really, really wobbly. So the critical point, the big mind shift, is this. We have to stop thinking of these as trade-offs and start seeing them as design requirements. A truly sustainable solution isn't one that just tries to do less damage to one pillar for the sake of another. No, it's a solution that finds a clever way to strengthen all 3 at the exact same time. Okay, so we have our framework, the 3 pillars. That's the what. But how do we actually use it? How do we apply it? Well, to answer that, we need to explore the how. And that means adopting a new mindset, thinking in systems. And this is the real question, isn't it? It's easy for me to sit here and say balance all 3, but in our messy, complicated, interconnected world, how do you actually do that? That factory doesn't exist in a vacuum. Its effects ripple out in ways that are often really, really hard to see at first. And the answer lies in this really fundamental shift in how we see things. We have to stop trying to solve problems as if they're all separate and isolated. Instead, we need to see the world for what it really is, a giant network of interconnected systems, where a tiny change in one place can cause huge, unexpected effects somewhere else entirely. Let's make this super concrete with a system we can all understand, a school cafeteria. It's pretty easy to map out, right? You've got your inputs. That's the food, the water, the energy coming in. Then you have the process, all the cooking and serving. And finally, you have the outputs, hopefully a bunch of happy, well-fed students, and of course, a lot of waste. But here's where it gets really, really interesting. That simple, straight line of input, process, output, that is not the whole story, not even close. The most powerful things that happen in any system happen because systems, well, they talk to themselves. And that talking has a name. It's called a feedback loop. This is simply when an output of a system, a result, doesn't just end there. Instead, it circles back around and influences one of the original inputs, creating a cycle that can either speed things up or slow things down over time.
So let's go right back to our cafeteria. An output is students are fed. Okay, well, the more students you successfully feed, maybe the more popular the cafeteria gets. That output, popularity, circles back around and influences an input. Now the cafeteria needs to order even more food to keep up with the demand. That's a super simple feedback loop. And finding these loops is the absolute key to understanding how systems really behave. So let's bring all this together. We've talked about the framework of the 3 pillars and the mindset of thinking in systems. And what that gives you is basically a brand new toolkit for looking at and understanding the world around you.
And here's how you use it. Anytime you hear about a new solution, a big project, a new policy, run it through this simple 2-part test. First, the 3 pillars test. Does it stand up on all 3 legs: environment, society, and economy? And second, find the feedback loops. What are the hidden connections here? What are the knock-on effects and the long-term consequences that nobody's talking about?
And this is why this all matters so much. This toolkit completely transforms our role. We stop being just problem solvers, running around putting out one fire after another. Instead, we become designers. Designers of smart, balanced, and resilient systems that are actually built to last, because they take the whole picture into account. So I'll leave you with this final thought to chew on. A plan that's great for the economy but pollutes our water, that's not a solution. A policy that saves the forest but bankrupts the nearby town isn't a solution either. All they're doing is pushing the problem onto a different leg of the stool. So the real question for you is this: where in your world, in your own community, do you see this imbalance? Because once you start looking for it, I promise, you'll start to see it everywhere. Thanks for tuning in.